Well, here we are, folks. It's wonderful June day. Almost, what was it, 1944. This time, the writing was on the wall towards the German High Command, I guess.
Correct.
And
but you're not now. You're asking people in the audience to say, "What happened in 1944?"
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a sad but strange truth on that. Bar that particular date, if it didn't occur, we would probably be all speaking German.
Well, where you are, you'd be speaking Japanese, possibly.
It could be, very well, yeah. The fate of the toss of a coin.
Correct. It's interesting that you should mention that because it actually I never. It's funny. Like you, I'm a history buff, and this should be a day. Obviously, in history, modern history, you should remember this day. But I actually only remember that I have to pay one of my bank cards.
Yeah, well, that's the fact of real life nowadays, I guess.
That's terrible. I know. But I did pay it.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, although they won't be happy because I didn't pay the entire sum. I only paid part of it today. Because I, like millions of other people, can't pay the whole freight today.
They're going to be extremely happy because now you'll have to pay interest on that.
Well, I know. But it's only a technical interest.
Oh, well, okay.
It's okay. So, and I'm only technically indebted to them.
Yes. I identify as a billionaire.
Technically or
maybe both.
Anyway, here we are live and in color on the 6th of June. Very interesting day in history, obviously, 1944. That was a sobering thing you had to start off, which was going to be our pithy and short podcast today.
Well, that's right, because as we move closer towards the end of the month here in Canada without a free trade agreement that was supposed to be one of the milestone events of the current Prime Minister of the country to achieve, still seems to be not happening. We also know that we're coming into the summertime, so government is going to fold soon. I think yours and your provincial government's folded already for 3 months or something, hasn't it?
Sometime in October, they're going to deem it important to come back and actually do the work that the voters voted them in for. But that's okay because Fat Ford, Freddie Ford, whatever you want to call him, Dougie Ford, our guy here, who's as interesting as your guy out there in BC. He's down to 30-some% on the popularity poll. So all his shenanigans have done him not good.
Well, I think part and parcel, and it goes into what we'll probably eventually get to talking about today, is you can't be all things to all people. And I think your premier and ours in particular out here in BC have tried to do that, knowing full well that it's impossible, but only hoping that maybe we're too unbright to see that. I don't know.
Well, human beings, none of us are perfect. Some less perfect than others. But in politics, there's even the tiniest wart is very apparent to people if it's pointed out enough times. In the case of our guy, he's not by himself, but because it's the most populous province in the country and all those things that, particularly in the GTA, which is supposed to be the center of the universe for Canada, as you well know. He's not he's no longer the favorite in the basket anymore, so the basket of stuff.
Which I understand, when you're not too popular, which I don't know if you can prorogue a provincial parliament like you do the federal government, but that's what you do. You just shut her down and hope for the best, and
Well, you
people
didn't prorogue it. You just set them on holidays, because the actual legislature's still in, and now
uh,
they're doing lots of stuff by order in council, or just by the power of the office of the premier. I mean, for example, they came out with a harebrained scheme, which is going to happen. All the water treatment plants and utilities that are associated with water and sewage, which were run by the province, are now going to be converted to nonprofit organizations, private nonprofit organizations. Well, now that's interesting because you have a function. Again, you take something that's working and you screw it up. Why would you take a well-known, well-functioning, most people accept that utilities such as that really need to be in the public domain. Even wild capitalists like me say, waterworks should not be a private company. It should,
no,
all
no.
right. Neither should the power corporate. None of these. There's some things that need to be owned by everybody and be not only owned by everybody, so to speak, but also the obligation of everybody to keep it running. Hence, you have, water boards, electricity boards.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's just some things that shouldn't be decided by how many shareholders get dividends from it, because you know what's going to happen. The difference between a nonprofit and a private corporation is that they don't make a profit except for the people who run the damn thing.
Mhm.
Okay, now, you and I have been in part of a nonprofit little organization for a long time, but we don't make any money. You know, the but the nonprofits, when you look at them in Canada, and the people who are in the administrative end of it suck up all the money. They make really good salaries running
Mhm.
nonprofits. Now, this is not to besmirch every nonprofit that's out there saying that they don't do good work, but there are some. I think you have to draw the line sometimes on what is it, what is appropriate for a nonprofit. And what
Well,
Ford has done is turning over these utilities to converting them to nonprofits. And my question is, who profits from being in the nonprofits?
well, I can see from the point of view of a government is that you can use that argument to say, well, we're cutting the size of government. So that's off of our plate. The salaries and things are not being picked up by me, and you, the taxpayer. But that only goes so far.
Well, the people who are running the water plants are not going to be gone the next day because it's not a nonprofit. They're just going to
Oh,
have the check signed by somebody else.
yeah.
But here's the problem. If you're a nonprofit and you're not able to have a liquidity as an organization, when you need to replace something, where are you going to get the money? Okay, you're going to have to go back to the same well, using the water terminology, that the government does. You don't raise taxes, you raise fees
Yeah.
for the water that or the whatever comes in your house or the sewage that goes out. Now, that's always a problem because you then have to go through more hoops and loops to do that because you're not going to have the money. You're going to have to still go back to the government to get permission to raise water rates, even though you're a nonprofit. So you're complicating
Yeah.
something that didn't need to be complicated more than it already is. And I know what you're saying, and that's probably exactly what Fat Ford is saying is I'm reducing the size of government. See me, I'm doing
I'm
the
being
the work
fiscally
that I was
responsible.
elected to do. But this is really this is like the shell game that you see on the streets of New York, where you got to find the
Well,
pea under the walnut shell.
and I guess, couple that and kind of a nice segue into what we were initially going to talk about is our great leader who is talking about selling off airports and seaports and land ports to other people. Like if that doesn't have warning bells going off in people's minds, I'm not sure what will.
Yeah.
Um,
Like,
like how would
again,
you? Obviously, you know, uh, Pearson Airport. has its problems. Vancouver Airport has its problems. Winnipeg Airport has its problems. But by selling off those entities to foreign nationals or businesses or whatever, let's go back to, what was it, 3 weeks ago, where they found out baggage handlers were switching out regular travelers' bags
Yes.
for cocaine or drugs, and this is when it's under government control. What would happen if that's under private control? We might not ever hear any of that stuff. So
Yeah, I think there are some things that are able to be run by the private sector under the
guys,
well, under the not the guise, but under the control of government, whether it's provincial or federal or municipal. For example, I don't have any problem here in our neck of the woods that we have a nonprofit that basically picks up the garbage.
mm-hmm.
Okay, it's called the Blue Water Recycling Association, and it makes its money through recycling. So all the stuff we put into their special bins that can be recycled, they sell off to recyclers. And the money they make for that offsets the cost of doing the picking up of the recycling. Okay. And every year they come out with a budget that basically has reduced the cost for us of recycling because there's money in garbage, and they basically have figured that out. But not everything can be done that way. So, airports are an interesting example, and seaports and harbors and whatever. If it's sold to a entity that you have jurisdiction over, literally and physically within the country, okay, fine. But if you sell it to a foreign entity that has a shell company within a shell company within a shell company, and you are trying to extract, service from them that is expected of the taxpayer, good luck with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
This doesn't work. And there's international examples very recently where the other things come into play, which can be quite dangerous. For example, when the Americans figured out that the Chinese had made a sweetheart deal with Panama to control the canal, that their ships were charged more than Chinese ships or pals of China. They put an end to that fairly quickly. Not only that, but you have the security and military component where China runs the canal. Well, they may not want to allow military vessels to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who would be the most likely country to be dinged with that?
Iceland.
Yeah, Iceland. So it's fraught with issues, and there is kind of a cute conundrum for our illustrious leadership in this country. They keep talking about this sovereignty thing over and over again, yet they're quite happy to sell stuff off to particularly the Chinese.
Yeah.
So it's a hollow gesture or a policy.
Yeah.
But it's part of what we were going to talk about is it's not just lies that we're talking about. It goes beyond lies. It's manipulation of the truth.
Yeah. Well, manipulation of truth. The old adage we used to have when we were in the civil service ourselves. Let's run this one up the flagpole to see who stands and salutes. Let's throw this jelly on the wall to see where it falls. And that's what I think we've got here in this country is the ability to look at something and point the finger. Like the recession was caused by Trump's tariffs.
Excuse me, it's a technical recession. Let me just.
True. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I was just reading a quote by off of the internet, and they didn't say technical. They just said.
Oh, they omitted the word technical.
Well, there is a black bar.
Sorry. Anyway, I didn't mean to.
So we know Canada is not being singled out here as a tariff country. That's happened to even those poor penguins on some island in the South Atlantic that have been caught up in this tariff thing.
Well, yes, and you're right. That's boogeyman number one that had to be invented by the liberals because they couldn't really find a really solid excuse for the idiot king that ran the place for 10 years. So, let's be perfectly fair here. That was a brilliant move on the part of the strategist to take Donald Trump as the boogeyman on this whole thing, and then suggest that the tariffs that, as you said, affected every country in the world, because it wasn't just Canada, it was every country in the world. And yet only two countries decided they were going to get their noses out of joint and start doing stupid stuff, and that's China and Canada.
Oh,
yeah.
The Canary Islands.
Yeah. Well, I guess they both start with C. China, Canada. I don't know. What else would be the common denominator here? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe censorship. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe secret deals. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. But exactly. So, and then as you know, and even people who watch Canada's BS broadcaster, the CBSC, you got to watch your language on here. 85% of everything is tariff-free with Canada, US. We got the best deal going. Well, what are you talking about then? What are you telling us? So, that's not even a lie. That's a very generous use of manipulation of the truth, in fact.
Well, yeah,
because the Trump tariffs have nothing to do with the recession or the other screw ups that have affected our economy, which neither the United States or any other country is responsible for. But anyway, we have lots of other examples to come.
The other again, a quote: the recession was caused by reductions in government spending. Technical or otherwise, it's the government's reducing things, so that's why you have a recession. Well, no, you haven't cut spending. Matter of fact, you're surpassing what the previous person that held the position had, and he was loathed by the people for his reckless spending, and yet here we are again, as you said many times on this podcast. Polls mean nothing until the day of the election. But apparently, still get 85% of the people who think that this current government is doing well.
Well, if you only fed one kind of information, that's all you're going to believe. But this guy, according to what we've been able to get from sources on the internet, which basically are those which quote the public management office and so on. It's $31 billion that the idiot king had already ballooned the deficit prior to this additional $31 billion. So we're at 73 or something now. $1 billion in debt. Well, this is not sustainable. Everybody knows that, but you've got people running around in the media making excuses. And the worst excuse of all, which I think is the most disingenuous one, but the one that's paid for by the government. Every subsidized media in this country, apes the same story. It's all the opposition's fault. Right? They're the ones who have spent the money. They're the ones who've created the job losses. They're the ones.
Alternatively, they're the ones that are coming in with all the problems of the country, but they're not doing anything about it.
Yeah, that's right. They're not doing anything about
how Parliament works here, folks.
Well, there's something very goofy going on here, and we can make all the jokes we want on this because it is laughable that we have a government that has created a majority government and still won't govern.
Yeah,
You keep whining about the opposition blocking stuff. How can they? If I have 6 votes and you have 4, I can jump up and down, stamp my feet, have a hissy fit, but you just got 6 votes, and out of the 10 people, you do what you want to do. And they're not even doing that. And even when they do something like that, they come up with the harebrained schemes like the one we saw last week, which fell flat on its face, which was the 15% tax increase on streaming services, which a majority are Canadian, right? They were going to take 15% of their revenues, gross revenues, and not the profits of streaming services. Well, frankly, I wish they would have done it because these people would have left Canada. You wouldn't be watching anything on TV, and then
that's
you
true.
can't get
Yeah.
and you can't get 15% of nothing out of nothing.
Well, it ranks right up there with the GST rebates and the like. Let's give people a portion of their money back so they think that we're really good people. When in reality, if you are really, really smart, you would cut some of your taxes, like the carbon taxes, one of the many carbon taxes that puts a price on, let's just say, oh, diesel fuel. Well, diesel fuel, which is used by probably, if not 100% of the farming population in this country, has got to be pretty close to it. So if you take a little bit of money off of the cost that they have to ensue to make, an acre of corn or an acre of wheat, or you want to produce pork bellies or whatever it is, that cost could then be taken off of the other parts of the transportation system, like the diesel trucks that have to get that from the farm to the various warehouses, and from the various warehouses to the various grocery stores. I mean, this is just compounding. I am not an economist, but maybe that's just too simplistic, and
No,
it
it's
would
not.
cause more
You don't
problems.
have to be an economist to know that your wallet's empty. And why did it get empty? And you didn't buy anything that you
Yeah,
didn't need. No,
yeah,
no. To go back to the beginning of this particular segment, they've had a majority government in 26. They had 4 years in 2016 to do all kinds of stuff that they could have done to improve stuff, and they did nothing except gut the system because the plan was, and it was very successful. I'm gonna give you the postmortem on the first 4 years of the Idiot King. The whole point of the first 4 years of majority government was to get rid of anybody that was in their way. Okay, that's where they used their power. They wielded power to restructure and to take out any organization, any individual, any structure that didn't let them do whatever the hell they want to do going forward. And they did that for the first 4 years, and people were asleep at the switch. Okay,
mm-hmm.
because they had this whole, and don't forget who was the boogeyman then too. Same guy,
Yeah,
right? So they go 4 years and they really did every DEI thing they could do. You just have to look at the record. Look at the personnel changes that took place. Look at the renaming of departments, goofy stuff, the global affairs and that kind of nonsense. My favorite one is the narcissistic crap that came out of that 4 years. So when the 4 years are done, they call an election, and guess what? Canadians said, "Wait a second, that's not exactly." And they gave them, and since then it's always been a minority government. Even the last couple of weeks here, where they're trying to buy people out, they're still a minority government, and they know it too. So they did that, and now what have we got? What we have here is all the things they're saying that have to be fixed. They're the ones who wrecked it. Okay. If they really wanted to do housing back in 2016 to 2020, they could have done it. They could have just done whatever the hell that was not the plan. The plan was to figure out a way to stay in power as long as possible. And you needed to develop the bureaucracy and the structure reshape the one that had been in place.
yeah,
That's what you had to do, and that's what they did. People don't like it. They're going to say that didn't happen. I can guarantee it happened. All you have to do is, first of all, look at the size of the public service. It's 40% bigger than it was when they took over in 2016. Where the hell are all those people doing? And then look at who are the people of the 40% that got plugged into these jobs. DEI reigned supreme. And then came the biggest gift of all, which was COVID. That for them was was like manna from heaven, because now we can really exercise our ability as a majority to do whatever the heck we want to do. That was brilliant. And foolishly, you had some people who decided they were going to challenge that, and they discovered what happens when evil takes over in a majority government, and that's what happened in Ottawa with the truckers. Full stop.
And
okay. And if you didn't learn your lesson, you didn't learn your lesson.
Yeah. And it'll be very interesting to find out what happens when you have the the Supreme Court justice who technically sides with the government is not going to
that word again
himself.
Technically.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm independent. I'm a Supreme Court justice, but I agree with what the government did, and I'm going to vote fairly on this.
No, I mean, anybody who would question what we just said is clearly a fascist. I can't put it any other way, because you just want power. You don't care at what cost, and as long as your ox isn't gored, you don't care. Okay, and so I as time goes on, I get more and more crusty, I guess, with this stuff, because history is proving us right. Okay, they were able to achieve in over a decade what no one else did. You can't say the Liberals didn't know what the hell they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. Okay, yeah. And they knew where the strengths were, and those strengths still exist. They exist in the core of the Toronto area, the core of Vancouver, and the core of Ottawa.
Well, that's let's be fair. It's not just large cities. It's small cities. It's intermediate cities. Edmonton has its one or two Liberal people. Calgary has one or two Liberal, which they may always have had, but.
No, but they're able to exploit the fact that the system is corrupt anyway. And if it wasn't corrupt before, they made it even more corrupt simply by changing a bad system. How is it possible that the PEI has more representation per capita than the entire province of Alberta? I mean, that doesn't make sense. But they know. Why is it that the whole system is creaking along here after 82, when the Constitution was repatriated? Now we're going to get a little bit into the weeds, but what did that prove? It only proved that one province is more equal than other province. That was all about, okay? These are the same people right now who are whining about Alberta wanting to do something Quebec's done twice already because they didn't like the setup, and they got their way, okay? Yeah. They may not have left Confederation, but they sure don't care really what Ottawa says on most things.
Yeah. And
not only are they operating on the outside quite well, they also operate on the inside even better. Okay. So you talk about a system that's inequitable. That's what it is. And that needs to be fixed, or this country is doomed. And every day I get crustier about that, because until some of the very basic things here don't get fixed, and they don't want to fix it. If you're eating cake and everybody else is eating crusty day-old bread, you're going to keep doing this.
Or older, yeah.
Anyway, but that's the reason.
And again, people are going to obviously be having their backs up with what we're saying here. But I did forward you a link, and people again who are listening to us can also go to this link. It's called carneywatch.ca. And this outlines a lot of things that are just totally monetary. Obviously, they've done a lot of accountability and checking with, I guess, public information sources, and have outlined everything that is really wrong with this current government, from their connection with Beijing, the strings of broken promises, the flip-flops of saying one thing and then coming out later on other things, conflicts of interest that the current prime minister is involved with. What are they covering up? What are they not covering up? I mean, somebody has done a lot of work.
And these are things you can do with forensic auditing, because it's money. You know, you know the old adage that those of us going back when we were big into law enforcement, you know, follow the money. Don't money is very little of this evil has anything to do with principles or ideology or whatever. It's all about filling your boots
and staying in power as long as you can.
to keep filling your boots.
Yeah,
and then making sure you've got a back door when the going gets tough. Because you know guys like Guillaume and the rest of them who exited, they and Freeland and that other woman McKinnon who's pissed away hundreds of millions of dollars and totally unaccounted for, you know, gone. Nobody can find this creature.
Well, and I guess the other side of that is the infamous Bev Oda $16 orange juice scandal, which, you know, if it didn't bring down the conservative government, it sure led to it. But now we got a guy who has spent, what was it, $200,000 on 3 trips on fine dining in the air. You know,
I know. But again, you know, we're bringing this up, but it's not brought up by the Canada BS Corporation, you know, or even CTV, even CTV. Any one of these guys. Look, we've had this discussion before. We're
flogging a dead horse.
Really, you know, as long as we have a media that's bought and paid for by the government, I don't care if it's a 10% subsidy or 100% subsidy. Once someone pays you, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. And that's what's fundamentally wrong with Canadian information sources, because you got to listen to people like us who are wandering around in the weeds on the internet with other people go, wait a second, you know, 1 and 1 is 2, not 6. No matter what those talking heads tell you on the TV, but it's, you know,
right. 1 on 1 is actually 6.
Then of course the biggest lie in my opinion of the bunch is, but the reason we have a problem in Canada with the reception is because we don't have enough people in the country. You brought in almost 5 million folks in the last 10 years. You shouldn't even be here. Okay. What are you talking about? You're chasing out skilled workers. You're chasing out educated people from Canada, and you're replacing them with the third world. Well, what the hell do you think is going to happen? You know, these are baby machines in many cases. All right. And they're bringing in ideas and cultures and traditions that are completely alien to a market economy, to a Western capitalist sectarian country, post nation state, whatever the hell they want to call. You know, this is nonsense. This is an utter nonsense. You know, and to suggest that those other countries are facing the same thing is nonsense, because they're not. Well, you know, they keep going on about, this is the one that I really like, okay, with the whole question of immigration and what have you, is they keep coming up with the OECD says, you got Champagne, you got Carney and McKinnon and the rest of them always babbling on about the OECD, say Canada is going to have the highest GDP growth in the next 2 years according to the OECD. But they don't tell you that right now the OECD has a list of 20 countries or 22 countries, sorry, that they talk about how they're doing with growth in the G. And guess which country is dead last? Canada. Okay, we're 22nd out of 22. The OECD, the famous OECD that they keep quoting. Well, if we're dead last, of course we're going to go. If we have nowhere else to go but up. If you're only going to count those 22.
Yeah. And, you know, to put a positive spin on that.
Really?
Yeah, we could be 23rd.
You know, if the OECD has another member, we'll drop down to 23. Anyway, you know, the countries that you know we're involved with in the G7 and other G20, let's say, all of them face the same problems globally that Canada does. Yet none of them are in recession. What are you talking about?
Technical.
Oh, I'm sorry. Technically, yeah. Okay. So, and then of course, on this list that was put up by our friends over at Canada Proud, you've got the Iran. Iran is why we're in trouble. Well, Iran started 6-8 weeks ago. Okay.
Well, apparently it must have had some butterfly effect, because apparently it also caused problems with our housing, according to the housing minister, Mr. Robertson, and a great many other things that have happened, in the last decade. Did they really know that it was coming and it caused all these problems?
Wait a minute. I have to get my Carmack thing here. What does it go here? Okay. Okay, here it goes. My Carmack one is, okay, so if that's true, if Iran is a problem, but we went from a $1.10 gas to $2.14 gas, and the taxes along with it went up, then that should be a windfall for the government, should it not?
Yeah, but if we would stop maybe spending willy-nilly and sending money out of the country, it might very well. But
well, where did that money come from? I mean, if since the Iranian crisis happened and the price of gas went up and everyone's making money for the government through revenues for higher gas revenues, then what are they talking about? You can't say that is a if I make more money, then that's not a problem. That's good. But apparently they can take even a good thing and turn that into a bad thing.
What's that old saying? We're going to take and snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat, or defeat and victory out of the jaws. I don't
know. And of course, it takes wonks like us to point out that more money's leaving the country than is coming in investments. Nobody seems to want to talk about that. More brain power is leaving the country than is coming in, because who would come here with a high skill and want to work for less money than going to any other part of the world? I mean, that's just not going to happen. We're in a competitive market for brain power, and back in the day when you and I were scouring the earth for good migrants to come to Canada, we had a system that was based on skill, education, potential, right? Whatever happened to that? Bringing a whole bunch of poor people from the third world is not how you build a first world democracy, market-driven capitalist free market. It doesn't work that way.
And as we pointed out, here in BC in particular, we have a company that is jumping through untold number of hoops to get a fully electric logging truck built. And they can't even do that without somebody sticking their nose in and throwing in obligations. And we had the company that was out in Victoria that wanted to look at harnessing tidal power, which runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, whether it's rain, snow, sleet, anything. And they couldn't get approval from any level of government here, so I think they ended up in Portland. And I guess that's just the sad state of affairs here, is that we're trying our best to shoot off our own foot, because in the past, being reptilian, it grew back, but we're finding out that maybe that gene is gone now, and we're down to the last toe, and if we shoot that off, we might not be able to walk anymore.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have basically described the last 11 years, whether it's under the Idiot King or this current gentleman, as managed decline for purposes yet to be figured out. I mean, why you want to wreck the joint is just it's beyond me. I don't understand. I could understand the evil of the first 4 years from 2016 to 2020. If you're really sitting around, Gerald Butts, Katie Telford, and the rest of that crowd figured out, 4 years is not good enough. We got to make sure that, this windfall that we got kicking Harper out of power over nonsense, taking the money that he left in the cupboard, we can use that. We got to figure out how do we use those assets to make sure that after 4 years, we have to go back to the electorate. We got to make sure no matter what happens, we still get to stay in power. That's what they did. Mm-hmm. And, as I said earlier,
that's true.
That part I have figured out now. I understand exactly what they did. The thing is that now we're at a point where, okay, so what now? Like, you wanted to wreck the place. You've done a pretty good job, but what do you want to replace that with? And I think all they're replacing it with is making sure that somewhere, they've got bank accounts in non-extraditable countries. So when something really goes bad here, we just leave town. And we're going to be living in those places that even if the long arm of the law suddenly comes back to life in Canada, which, sometimes when it's dead, it's dead. Like the what is it? The Monty Python joke, that parrot is dead, expired, deceased. If we end up being a country that is like the dead parrot, we won't. These people we live in high on the hog in various parts of the world. You can't find Freeland, you can't find McKinnon, you won't find Guilbeault. These people will all disappear into the fog of history, and with fat wallets and the leftover detritus and wreckage in Canada will be, who knows how that. This is a real bleak thing we're talking about here. I think it's savable, but we better get our shit together real soon. Whoops.
Or poop.
Yeah, but it's true. I'm if we're wrong, great. Because
well, that say, that kearneywatch.ca, it's obviously an individual or a group that are looking at forensics monetarily. So we're not the only ones that are raising red flags here, and perhaps more and more people, if they would look at this and see what's going on, they would be willing to say that the emperor doesn't have any clothing here, and that hopefully will be what saves us a bit. But.
Yeah, I think. See, what bothers me even more than all this other stuff, because we can fix fiscal structures. We can shrink government down to where it actually does things for people instead of people doing things for government. What we are looking at is a social decline, which you can't really turn around that quickly, because if we get into a really negative mindset, turning that around is. And then I'm kind of, beginning to feel that that's a direction we're going in, and unless we come to our senses collectively, I don't know. Look, we can't last 3 years like this. The next election is until at least 3 years away, and then what? What's we this year? This is the summer of real crossroads, if you will, of intersectionality of ideas and things that are going to happen. We have the USMCA question to be resolved, and my money and Polymarket's money on is that there is not going to be a renewal. Americans are going to walk away from this, because if you just look at how well they've been doing in terms of reshoring their businesses, they have no interest in sharing that with Mexico and Canada. Yeah. And certainly much less with Canada than Mexico. In fact, the Mexicans already have figured it out and are continually negotiating with the Americans. We're just setting ourselves up for the big fall here and hoping that China and the EU come to our rescue. This is nonsense. It's patently stupid, but okay.
Well, I guess to use that old famous line in a song from many years ago, when you reach the fork in the road, it's jokers to the right and jokers and clowns to the left.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great song from the 60s, early 70s. Steelers Wheel. Yeah. Well, that, and then you have the two secessionist movements, and then you have essentially the decline of the industrial base. That is, this legislation that came out last week, signed by the Trump administration on the whole deal of import export management. They got really, really annoyed with the continual cheating by Canada on imports and exports. Exports from Canada pretending to be Canadian when in fact they're not. They're something else. And imports from other places which are in direct competition with American importers.
Yeah.
With basically their lying eyes are getting caught. So you can't do this for too long with folks who start seeing returns on their investment. And the return on investment for the Americans has been in the works for just over a year. People forget that when they passed the big beautiful bill and the tax cuts last year in the U.S., it's only now coming into
Fruition.
It's starting to bloom. They've created jobs, they've reshored companies, they're making money from import duties from not just Canada, from everywhere. Okay, because other people want to trade. This is something that those who, particularly in Canada, who feel somehow maligned by the U.S. don't get it. They are looking after themselves. We should be looking at ourselves, at our own interests, but our interests collectively aren't being looked at. The interests of a small group of people are being looked at here.
Yeah,
that's what we have. Okay, and when you're in professional sports. What do you aspire to when you're in the minor leagues? You want to be in the big leagues, okay? Because that's where the money is, and we just continually want to aspire to stay in the minors, and be proud of being a minor league player. This is nonsense, The big leagues are working with the big league, and the only one we got is next door. And sorry, that's geography did it, history did it, the environment did it. There's nothing we can do about it. Okay, and until that is turned around, and that doesn't matter who the hell is in the White House. That is irrelevant to the whole thing. If we can't fix our own problems, it's really not an excuse to say, well, there's so and so. It's just someone else is causing the problem. And that goes back to the number one lie that we started off with. Most of the things that we have done here are as a result of our own mismanagement.
Yeah.
And it is managed decline. That is the technical term for the last 11 years.
Yeah.
Managed decline. And again, for whose interests? Well, I think
we'll find out, I guess.
We'll find out. So this is the summer of discontent, I think, for Canada and Canadians, and we'll have lots to grouse over the summer, but we'll let things sort of simmer along. I think people need a break from this and just try to figure out how to live through somehow the next couple of months, because it's going to be choppy. And the summertime is lousy for political stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But the fall is going to be, I think, tough unless we come to our senses, and I hope we do. We're going to be boring if we keep beating a dead horse, as you said, with the same stuff all the time. People are going to say, Bob and Tom keep talking about the same stuff. I think I'm going to go watch old Laurel and Hardy movies.
Yeah, we're trying to do that.
Yeah, well. So you're off on holidays?
Next week. Going to be off for 3 weeks, visiting with family and having get-togethers, which will be nice.
Good stuff.
Well, maybe squeeze in one little journal before we leave, but yeah.
Well, no promises to our listeners and viewers, but sometimes a little bit of a hiatus is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's people need to enjoy the summer. Sometimes a holiday will maybe that'll refresh and rejuvenate people a little bit. One can but hope.
Yes.
We're going to start being told we're full of bovine excrement, so we better stop it.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, with that, have a great 3 weeks with the family.
Whether you don't, hit that little button or
hit the like button. Yeah. Don't hit that button because we don't like that.
If you know that, that's fine too. I'm beyond the everybody's entitled to their opinion. And
oh yeah, and by the way, for those of you who watch this on X and want to get your bots and send cursing comments to us, we have a button. It's called a blocking button. We don't care for stuff like that. Actually, we don't even comment on good things you write to us. We're just happy that you're watching. But if best you can do is fill up the
spew hatred.
Yeah, on any level, you're wasting your time with us because we don't care. All right.
And a lot of that had to do is because any feelings and caring that we had was beat out of us when we worked for the civil service so many years ago.
Yes. One day we'll have a special edition on war stories, civil service war stories.
Oh, yes.
All right, Bob. I'll see you soon.
You too. Take care.